It was supposed to be a simple weekend, a chance to get away from everything work, stress, my ex constantly blowing up my phone. Just me, my dog, and the quiet. I had booked a remote cabin in upstate New York. A little run down, sure, but cheap, and the photos online showed a cozy fireplace and a big deck overlooking the forest. Secluded, peaceful, exactly what I needed. The drive was longer than I expected. By the time I turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin, the sun was already setting. Trees loomed on either side, thick and gnarled, branches twisting overhead like skeletal fingers. My dog, Max, shifted uneasily in the passenger seat, his ears pinned back. "Almost there, buddy," I muttered. When I finally pulled up to the cabin, something felt wrong. The place looked off like the pictures online, but not quite. The wood was more faded, the windows darker, the front porch sagged a little more than I remembered. A vague unease prickled at my skin, but I shook it off. It was just the isolation getting to me. I let Max out, grabbed my bags, and stepped inside. The air was stale, like the place hadn't been used in years. Dust motes drifted in the fading light. The furniture was sparse: a couch, a small dining table, an old armchair by the fireplace. A single hallway led to the bedroom and bathroom. Max sniffed at the floor, his tail stiff. Normally, he explored new places with his nose down and tail wagging, but here he hesitated. I set my bags down and checked my phone. No service. Figures. I started unpacking, trying to shake the unease. By the time I finished, it was dark. The forest outside was pitch black, no moonlight breaking through the dense canopy. Max sat by the door, staring at it. A deep growl rumbled in his throat. I frowned. "What is it, boy?" He didn't move, just kept growling, low and steady. I peered through the peephole. Nothing but trees and darkness. No movement, no sound, just the woods. I locked the door. The rest of the night was quiet. I read by the fireplace for a while, then turned in early. The mattress was stiff, the sheets smelled musty, but I was too tired to care. Then, sometime after midnight, Max started barking. I jolted awake, my heart pounding. He stood at the foot of the bed, staring at the bedroom door. Fur bristled. He barked again, a deep warning bark. I sat up. "Max, what is it?" Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving just outside the bedroom door. My blood turned to ice. I reached for my phone. Still no service. No Wi-Fi either. I was completely cut off. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear. The house was silent. Too silent. Max growled again, but softer this time, almost afraid. I slid out of bed and grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a metal flashlight. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening. Nothing. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was the house settling, or some animal outside. I turned the knob slowly and eased the door open. The cabin was dark, the dying embers in the fireplace casting flickering shadows. I stepped into the hallway. The floorboards creaked under my weight. Max stayed close, his body tense. I swept the flashlight across the room. The front door was still locked. The windows were shut. Everything was exactly as I left it. And yet, I knew someone had been there. The air was different, charged, like the lingering electricity after a storm. I checked every corner of the cabin. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no muddy footprints. Eventually, I convinced myself I was just paranoid. Maybe the isolation was messing with my head. I went back to bed. Max curled up beside me, still tense. I barely slept. Day 2. In the morning, I found something strange. Footprints. Not mine. Not Max's. Bare footprints, in the middle of the cabin. They led from the front door to the hallway, and stopped right outside my bedroom. I stared at them, my stomach twisting. They weren't there last night. I checked the door again, still locked. No broken windows, no signs of anyone forcing their way in. And yet, someone had been inside. I packed my things. The cabin was paid for through Sunday, but I didn't care. Something wasn't right here. I wasn't about to stick around and find out what. I loaded my bags into the car, grabbed Max's leash, and turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. The engine wouldn't start. I tried again. Still nothing. I popped the hood, but I'm no mechanic. Everything looked fine, no loose wires, no leaking fluids, but the car was dead. That's when I noticed something. The trees. They were closer. I know how that sounds. Trees don't move. but I swear they were closer than they were yesterday. The dirt road I had driven up was barely visible now, the branches crowding in, reaching. Max whined. I slammed the hood shut and grabbed my phone. No service, no Wi-Fi. I was trapped. Night 2. That night, I barricaded the door with furniture. I kept the fireplace going, its warmth doing little to chase away the cold dread creeping through me. Max wouldn't stop pacing. His ears twitched at every creak, every rustle of leaves outside. At 2:13 a.m., I heard them again. The footsteps. Slow, closer this time. Then a whisper. Low, just beyond the bedroom door. I gripped the flashlight so hard my knuckles ached. The whispering stopped. And then, a single knock. Soft, almost polite. Then another, and another. I couldn't breathe. I reached for Max. His body was rigid, every muscle tense. The knocking grew louder, harder, more urgent. I squeezed my eyes shut. Go away, I whispered. Silence. Then, click. The sound of the bedroom door unlocking. I lost it. I grabbed my flashlight and threw it with everything I had. It hit the door frame with a loud crack. Then nothing. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, it was morning. The door was still locked, the furniture still barricaded, but on the floor, by the bed, more footprints. I left the cabin that morning, walked until I found a road, flagged down a car, got the hell out of there. Later, when I looked up the rental listing, it was gone, like it never existed. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it, the knocking, and I wonder what would have happened if I had opened the door. I know how this sounds. I know you won't believe me, but I need to write it down before I start forgetting again, because that's what it does. It makes you forget, and I can feel it happening already. The cabin belonged to my uncle. At least, that's what my dad always said. It had been in the family for years, tucked away in the deep woods of northern Maine. Nobody used it anymore. No cell service, no electricity, just a wood stove and a generator that never worked right. I never thought much about it until a month ago. My life was unraveling. Divorce papers in the mail, credit card debt stacking up. My boss was circling me like a vulture, waiting for an excuse to let me go. I needed out, a break, a reset. So when my dad suggested I take a few weeks at the cabin to clear my head, I figured, why not? Seclusion sounded perfect. The drive took longer than I expected. The last 30 miles were nothing but dirt roads, winding deeper and deeper into the forest. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was already sinking. It looked exactly how I remembered from childhood, small, worn, hunched beneath the weight of thick pine trees. A sagging porch, a single dark window staring out like a blind eye. I killed the engine, and for the first time, I realized how quiet it was. No birds, no wind, just silence. It felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. I ignored the feeling, grabbed my bags, and stepped inside. The cabin smelled like dust and old wood. The air was heavy, stale. I found the lanterns, lit one, and tried the generator. Nothing. Typical. I built a fire instead, warmed up some canned soup, and settled into the old armchair near the window. That's when I noticed something was missing. The cabin had no mirrors. I didn't remember that. There had always been one above the sink and a small one in the bedroom, but now nothing. Bare walls. I told myself it wasn't weird. Maybe my dad had taken them down. Maybe they'd broken. I let it go. Outside, the trees loomed against the night sky, too tall, too still, and in the silence I swore I heard something breathing. The next morning, I stepped outside to find footprints in the snow. Not mine. Bare feet leading from the tree line to the porch. They stopped right in front of the door. My stomach dropped. Someone had been standing there, watching me. I spun around, scanning the trees. The woods stretched endlessly, dark and empty. Too empty, like they were hiding something. I should have left then. Should have packed my bags, gotten in my car, and driven back to civilization. But I didn't. Instead, I forced a laugh, convincing myself I was just overreacting. Maybe it was a trick of the melting snow. Maybe I'd walked outside last night and forgotten. That made sense, right? It had to. That night, the wind picked up. The trees groaned and swayed, branches scratching against the roof. I sat by the fire, nursing a beer, forcing myself to relax. Then a knock, not on the door, on the window. My blood went cold. Slowly, I turned my head. Through the glass, just beyond the tree line, someone was standing there, still, motionless, too far to see clearly, but close enough to know they were watching me. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. My pulse pounded in my ears. Who's there? No answer. I grabbed the lantern and moved toward the door. I don't know what I was planning to do, confront them, chase them off, but the second I stepped outside, they were gone. No footprints, no sound, just the wind howling through the trees. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I was convinced I'd imagined it. Maybe stress was messing with my head. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. I needed a distraction. So I searched the cabin, hoping to find something: old books, tools, anything. Instead, I found a box of photos in the back of the closet, dusty, yellowed at the edges, pictures of my family, my dad as a kid, my uncle, my grandparents. But there was one photo that made my stomach drop. A picture of the cabin, taken decades ago, and standing in the tree line, the same dark figure, blurry, barely visible. But there, watching, just like last night. I felt sick. My hands trembled. I flipped through the photos, desperate to prove it was just my imagination. But he was in every single one, always in the background, always watching. I tried to leave. I packed my bags, got in the car, turned the key. The engine wouldn't start. I tried again and again. Nothing. A dead, choking silence filled the air. The trees loomed closer. The sky felt lower. I stepped out, heart hammering. The wind had stopped. The world felt held in place. And then, from behind me, "Why are you leaving?" The voice was right in my ear. I spun around. No one there, but the door to the cabin was open. And inside, standing by the fire, was me, grinning, his head tilted, his eyes wrong. I staggered back. My mind screamed, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But then he took a step forward, and I ran. I don't remember how I got out. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, engine running, headlights cutting through the trees. I hit the gas and never looked back. I don't remember driving home. Just flashes, pavement, headlights, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The cabin rental doesn't exist. I tried to find the listing, tried to call the number. Nothing. My dad swears the cabin burned down years ago, but I know what I saw. And at night, when I close my eyes, I still hear it, that voice. "Why are you leaving?" I should have left when I saw the window. The cabin was supposed to be abandoned. No one had lived there in years. No one was supposed to be inside. But as I stood at the edge of the clearing, my breath fogging in the cold October air, I saw it. A single window, the glass smeared with something dark. And behind it, a shape, watching me. I needed to get away for a while. Life had become unbearable in ways I never expected. 2 months ago, my mom died. Stroke, sudden, brutal. I had been on the phone with her 20 minutes before it happened. I didn't get to say goodbye. After the funeral, things spiraled. My job felt meaningless. My apartment felt too small. Every time I looked at my phone, I expected to see her name. I couldn't stand it anymore. So when my friend Carter mentioned his uncle had an old hunting cabin up in the mountains, I jumped at the offer. A week alone, deep in the woods, no service, no responsibilities, just silence. I told myself it was exactly what I needed. The drive up was uneventful. Miles of empty road. The trees turning shades of gold and crimson. By the time I reached the trail leading to the cabin, the sun had started to dip below the horizon. It was smaller than I expected, just a single-story structure with a sagging roof, tucked between skeletal pines. The place felt wrong somehow, but I shook it off. It was just old. The inside smelled like dust and rot. I found the breaker, flipped the switch, and a dim yellow light buzzed to life. No TV, no Wi-Fi, just a wood stove, a rickety bed, and a radio with a broken antenna. Exactly what I wanted. That first night, I made a fire, heated up a can of chili, and sat in the old armchair by the window, staring out at the endless black of the forest. For the first time in months, my mind was quiet, for a while at least. Then, a knock. Soft, deliberate. I froze. It had come from inside the cabin. The next morning, I woke to a strange sound. A faint, scraping noise, like nails against wood. It took me a second to realize it was coming from the front door. I climbed out of bed, heart hammering. The sound stopped. Slowly, I reached for the handle and pulled the door open. The forest was empty, just the rustling of wind through the trees. But when I looked down, I saw the door, covered in scratches. Not like an animal, not random. They were deliberate. Deep, jagged lines, dozens of them. And beneath them, at the very bottom, I saw something else. Words, carved into the wood. Let me in. That night, I locked the door. I told myself the scratches had always been there, that Carter's uncle had done it, or maybe some previous renters. I had almost convinced myself until I saw the man in the woods. It was past midnight. I couldn't sleep. The fire had burned low, filling the room with shifting shadows. Then movement, through the window, past the trees. A figure, standing just beyond the clearing, still, watching. I held my breath, heart pounding. He was too far to make out any details, just a dark shape. Then, he moved, not walked, glided. A single unnatural step closer, then another, and another, until he was standing at the edge of the porch. The fire crackled behind me, throwing his shape into silhouette. Too tall, too thin, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. For a long moment, we stood there, staring at each other through the glass. Then he lifted one hand and placed it against the window, palm flat, fingers too long, too bony. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, breath shallow, cold sweat creeping down my back. Then he smiled, a slow, deliberate grin stretching too wide, and he whispered something. I couldn't hear it through the glass, but I understood. Let me in. The next morning, I packed my things. I didn't care if Carter thought I was crazy. I was leaving. But when I stepped outside, the forest was different. The path I had driven in on was gone. Not overgrown, not blocked. Just gone. Like it had never been there. Like the trees had shifted overnight, closing in. Panic clawed at my chest. I ran in the direction of the road, pushing through thick branches. But the more I ran, the deeper I seemed to go. The cabin was gone. The road was gone. Everything was gone. I was trapped. And then, somewhere behind me, a voice whispering, "Let me in." I don't remember getting back to the cabin. One second I was running, and the next I was inside. The fire was roaring, though I hadn't lit it. The door was closed. And across the room, in the chair by the window, he was sitting there, grinning. I wanted to move, but my body wouldn't respond. His mouth opened, and his voice came out in my voice. "I was waiting for you." Darkness swallowed the room. They found me 3 days later, wandering a back road 10 miles from the cabin. I don't remember how I got there. The police said the cabin didn't exist. The property had burned down 20 years ago. There was nothing there but trees. I would have believed them. I would have told myself it had all been some horrible, stress-induced nightmare. But last night, I woke up to a sound, soft, rhythmic, scratching, on my apartment door. I checked the peephole. No one was there. But when I looked down, I saw the words carved into the wood. "Let me in." I should have trusted my gut the first night. There were too many little things that didn't add up. The way the trees stood too still, how the wind would stop the second I opened a window, the unsettling silence between the crackles of the fire. But I ignored it, because I wanted this trip to be perfect, because I wanted to believe I was alone. I booked the cabin after my life went to hell. 2 months ago, I walked in on my girlfriend of 4 years with someone else, in our apartment, in our bed. Everything after that was a blur, shouting, packing, drowning my sorrows in cheap whiskey. I quit my job a few weeks later. Not because I had another one lined up, but because I couldn't stand walking into that same office every day, pretending I was fine. I needed an escape, somewhere remote, somewhere I could be alone. So when I found a listing for a private rental deep in the woods, I booked it without hesitation. No neighbors, no cell reception, just a fireplace, a stocked kitchen, and a view of the lake. It sounded like exactly what I needed. The drive took longer than expected. By the time I reached the cabin, it was almost dark. The place was smaller than the photos made it look, just a single-story wooden structure with a steeply pitched roof and a porch swing that creaked in the breeze. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, soaking in the quiet. No cars, no voices, just the rustling of trees. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I grabbed my bags, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. And then I saw the fireplace. It was burning. A fresh stack of logs crackled in the hearth. The flames flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. The warmth hit me immediately, pushing against the cold air outside. My stomach clenched. I was supposed to be alone. I checked my phone, no service. "Hello?" I called, stepping forward. "Anyone here?" Silence. The cabin wasn't big. A single bedroom, a small kitchen, a bathroom. It took less than a minute to search every inch of it. No one, just the fire, burning low. I told myself the owner must have started it before I arrived. A courtesy. Maybe they wanted to make the place feel welcoming. I told myself that, and I forced myself to believe it. The first real sign that something was wrong came the next morning. I woke up late, still groggy from the long drive. The fire had burned out, leaving only a pile of gray ash. Sunlight filtered through the curtains. I stretched, got up, and went to make coffee. That's when I saw the scratches. Thin, jagged lines, dozens of them etched into the inside of the cabin door. Some were deep, cutting into the wood. Others were faint, almost hesitant, like someone had scratched at it over and over. Trying to get out, I swallowed hard. I hadn't noticed them last night. How had I missed that? I ran my fingers over the grooves. Fresh. The wood was rough, splintered at the edges. A cold wave of unease rolled over me. I checked the lock. Deadbolt, still in place. I tried to shake the feeling. Maybe an animal had gotten inside at some point. Maybe the previous renter had a dog. Maybe. I made my coffee, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. That night, I sat by the fire reading. The wind picked up outside, howling through the trees. The cabin creaked softly, settling into the cold. At some point, I must have dozed off. I woke up to knocking. Soft, rhythmic. Right outside the front door. I bolted upright, my heart hammering. I checked the clock, 2:13 a.m. The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. I slowly rose to my feet, moving toward the door. My pulse pounded in my ears. I forced myself to speak. "Hello?" Silence. I hesitated, then reached for the handle. The moment my fingers touched the knob, a shadow moved past the window. I jumped back. Something was outside. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace, my hands shaking. "Who's there?" No response. I crept to the window, peering through the glass. Nothing. Just the dark trees, the empty porch. No footprints in the snow. No sign anyone had been there at all. The knocking never came again. But I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By the third day, I had convinced myself I was just imagining things. Lack of sleep, the isolation, my own paranoia. I told myself that, right up until I woke up to find the front door missing. Gone. Not open. Gone. The wall where it had been was now solid wood, seamless, as if the cabin had never had a door at all. I staggered back, my breath hitching. This wasn't possible. I ran my hands over the wood, searching for the seam, the hinges, anything. Nothing. I turned, sprinting toward the window. The forest outside was different, closer. The trees had moved in, pressing against the glass. My stomach twisted. This couldn't be happening. I needed to get out. I grabbed a chair, lifted it above my head, and hurled it at the window. The glass didn't break. The chair bounced off like it had hit solid concrete. Panic clawed at my throat. I ran to the bedroom, tried the back window. Same thing. The walls felt tighter, the air thicker. The cabin was smaller than before. I turned back to the living room, and the fireplace was burning again. Even though I hadn't lit it, the flames flickered, stretching higher, licking the ceiling. The air shimmered with heat. And then, from inside the flames, something moved. A shape shifted in the embers. A hunched, twisted figure crawled from the flames. Its limbs bent the wrong way, its mouth stretched too wide, and its eyes were mine. It grinned. "Welcome home?" The cabin lurched, the walls shrank. I ran, but there was nowhere left to go. I don't know how long I've been here. The cabin won't let me leave. The fire never goes out. The scratches keep appearing on the walls. And sometimes, at night, I hear knocking, soft, rhythmic, right behind me.